star one, sorry. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for our webinar. So for those of you that haven't attended, GVO, we are doing a GVO NetSuite Simplified webinar series. And the idea is every month we take a topic and we try to simplify it. And by simplify, what I mean is we try to give you the talking points that you would be able to reach out to whomever your service provider is and have a conversation about what your goals are as it relates to demand planning. Attending this, you shouldn't have the expectation that you'll be able to go out and configure your system and do demand planning tomorrow. That just wouldn't be reasonable. But today, and we're going to be going through Demand Planning Simplified. That will be led by my peer, Renee. And I just want to encourage everyone, as we're going through the webinar, please interact with us. You're going to notice on the GoToMeeting, there is a point where you can have questions. So as things come up, please capture those, write those down for us, and then when we get to the end, we'll go through your list of questions and try to give you as many answers as we can on the spot. And if not, we can always follow up with you after the fact. So before we go into everything, I'd just like to transition to what we did last month. So if we could. So last month, for those of you that attended, you got to see my ugly mug, and we went through Warehouse Simplified. And what we covered was, again, some of the common pitfalls that we've seen have with some of our clients. So we talked through things like EDI, we talked through item setup, we talked through cycle counting, those kind of subjects. So if you have any questions after the meeting, there will be an email provided, and if you'd like follow-up from that, please reach out and let us know. And we'd be happy to send that over to you. All right, so just like to go through and introduce the two of us today. So again, like I said, my name is Jamie Strike. I've been with goVirtualOffice for approximately 5 years. Prior to coming to GVO, my background was in manufacturing and distribution. Also have my MBA in finance. So Renee, would you like to introduce yourself?
I would, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Renee Linscheid. I'm also one of the senior business consultants here at GVO. Very similar background to Jamie. I hold an MBA in supply chain operations. Prior to working in consulting, I worked in biotech, electronics, and retail in the apparel industry. So have had backgrounds in inventory planning and in global sourcing. So with that, we're going to go ahead and we'll get started on our next slides.
All right, so this is just kind of a slide with all of our accolades. So just to let you guys know, last year, 2019, we were the Suite Success Partner of the Year. We've done hundreds of implementations, a lot of different projects, and by projects, these are usually things that occur after we do the implementation. So process improvement, things that we've captured at the beginning that, we aren't necessary for day one, but we do want to work on that. We support over 2,000 users. And again, the other thing is, our staff going through and making sure that we have the appropriate NetSuite certifications to best serve you. So if we can, next slide, Renee. All right, so this slide, I just want to, for those of you that haven't worked with GVO, I just want to outline kind of what our structure is. So when you reach out for assistance, this is the feel that you're going to get. So Renee and I are both members of the client success team. And so what that means is, for everyone that is a client of ours, you are assigned a senior business consultant, like myself or Renee. And the idea is when you have new initiatives that come up, we meet with you, we meet with your leadership team, and we try to define what does that look like. And we try to figure out what is the cadence that works for your organization in order to close the gap between where you are and where you want to go within NetSuite. So we're the people that you reach out to get the proposal together and get that definition of where you want to go. In addition to that, everyone is assigned an execution team. So execution teams typically range from 2 to 4 individuals, senior application consultants, and then a number of supporting application consultants. And the idea is they are the ones that are going to gain familiarity with your account. So once we're through with either a project or an implementation, they have context. So if you reach out for assistance, they're the ones that you're talking to. So you're not just going into a generic pool where you could reach anybody, and it may take an hour or two for them to come up to speed on what you want. So it really, in my opinion, I think it's a better customer service experience, and it really helps expedite either resolution or figuring out what the steps are to that. And then in addition to that, we also have our development and data team. So our developers are all located within the state of Wisconsin, and what we do is if you have functionality that NetSuite doesn't provide, a third-party pre-built application doesn't provide, those are the individuals that will reach out to help close that gap. So some of the low-hanging fruit might be customizing your PDF and what that looks like for the client. Some of the more robust solutions might be doing a custom integration to a different third-party app that you've decided to purchase that may not integrate natively to NetSuite. They're the ones that help with that. And then in addition, our data team. Again, with NetSuite, I would tell people it's an inanimate object. You know, it bears you no ill will. But if the data that you have in the system isn't what it should be, your results won't matter. You can design and have this great process that you think is going to really improve efficiency, but if data is not there or is not flowing, you are not going to get the results that you anticipate. Now I'm going to pass it over to Renee, and we're going to get into what we want to cover today.
All right, thanks, Jamie. So as we're going to get started, as you probably know, NetSuite was built to support the needs of product-based businesses. It offers a variety of native features, functions, and processes to help your businesses have the right items available at the right time and in the right place. So one of the key features of the demand planning module, it provides users with the ability to predict inventory based on either your historical demand or your sales forecasts. So with this insight, it's going to offer you functionality and ease of use to help you manage your inventory more efficiently. So today we're going to go ahead. What we want to cover is we're going to understand the basics of demand and supply. So make sure you understand it from a NetSuite perspective. We also want to share, any pitfalls that we've experienced in the industry, whether working with clients or, in our past, just experiences that we've had. We're going to look at item setup preferences and make sure that you understand how all those fields are going to affect your calculations. That is bar none the basis of the entire process. If you don't get that part right, demand planning is going to fail for you. So those are very imperative to make sure you know that. Next, we're going to show how the execution happens. So kind of show you some of the screenshots. It's not really a demo, but just kind of walking you through how demand and supply plans will look within the application. I want to make sure that you have an understanding of how it's going to come together from beginning to end, from the point of figuring out your demand all the way until the fact that you've received the product in your warehouse. From then, you want to make sure that we're also able to show you suggestions on the items that you can order or even the work orders that you're going to be assembling within your manufacturing facility. So as we get through all of this, the big thing it's going to help you understand, it's going to ensure that you have the inventory at the right place, the right time, and the right quantity to meet the needs of your customers. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So our biggest thing that we want to kind of cover is some of the demand planning pitfalls, like we talked about with our industry experience. Either we've seen it, we've heard about it, and we just want to kind of share some examples that we've seen out there, just so you don't kind of fall into that same trap. So the first one is an example of a situation where the company had no planning whatsoever. So they were a made-to-order manufacturer. Generally, they'd have raw materials on hand. Their process for ordering raw materials was a card that was attached to either the last bag or the last box of the raw material when it was in the stockroom. When someone pulled it out, the card got pulled off, put on the purchaser's desk, and they went ahead and reordered material that way. All sounds good and dandy, you're pretty much doing it based off of when you have orders coming in. Well, the problem that happened is that when it came to the shipping materials, there were no foam inserts available to ship that product out to the customer. And that's imperative to make sure that the product was going to be stable and not damaged in transit. Well, the foam insert was actually purchased by a supplier overseas. So the problem with that, if anybody who's ever done purchasing, you understand you're not just paying for freight of that based off of the weight of an item. Everything is based off of dimensional weight. So with that, the CEO went ahead and authorized an air freight shipment. So either he didn't realize that that was going to be an astronomical bill coming in because the dimensions made it an oversized box. Okay, huge. So once the air freight bill came in, ended up at the front office, and they saw what that charge was, there was a lot of yelling and a lot of screaming, and it was a very small facility. You could hear it all out on the production floor. So it ended up causing a lot of anxiety for workers. You know, they weren't sure of who was going to get in trouble. Why did this happen? Without having a sense of planning and just open communication, it caused a lot of stress, not just for the business operation itself, but it even caused stress within the supply chain, because it was going back and kind of finger pointing at suppliers, asking, well, why did you allow that to happen? They did exactly what was authorized by the business. So again, it's just, you know, you don't have to have a robust planning, but again, you need to make sure that you're understanding, you know, where your material is at, when is it needed, how are you going to account for that material, especially if you're purchasing something overseas with a very long lead time. All right, our next example. So as we went through here, this was an example of where people just weren't communicating with each other within a business. So the situation that occurred in this case was they had a demand planning process. It was great, you know, they had the systems in place. When they went to actually key in their purchase order, there was a fat key. So instead of 2,000 SKUs, they ended up ordering 20,000 SKUs of an item. So, you know, we're all human, it happens. But the piece that didn't happen is there was no reconciliation that was happening within the process. Even though that probably went out, if someone was going through and reviewing their plans, doing their bottoms up planning, or even doing tops down, they should see that there was a huge disconnect within the process to say, well, why are my receipts so much larger than what I'm planning for? Again, we know we're all human, but it just takes that extra step of doing some of that reconciliation. So unfortunately, it didn't happen in time. The 20,000 SKUs ended up coming into stock. And the only way to get rid of it was a huge blowout sale, and they ended up having a friends and family discount. Needless to say, I was able to take advantage and have 3 of those items sitting at home right now because the price couldn't be beat. But it just goes to show that, again, even with your best planning systems, you still have that human interaction. You still need to be involved in the process and understand what's happening. Again, another process of where your cross-functional teams need to be able to come together. If your marketing team decides to promote an item on a back cover or on a front cover, or maybe that item ended up being on Oprah's most favorite list, that is going to be a process that's going to drive your demand. You know, those are people that, you know, the influencers are building it out. You know, they want to see, oh, hey, this is something that everybody has. I probably want it too. If your planning organization or your inventory organization is not aware of those promotions or those events that are occurring, they aren't going to know to make sure they're ramping up enough demand and supply to take into account. So that's just another example of, you want to make sure there's cross-functional involvement. Everybody understands what's driving the needs for that inventory. It may not just be based off of your historical sales, because this is an item that you've invested in. You want to put back into it. You want to build sales on that item. And by doing that extra step, you just need to make sure you're doing the due diligence of communicating that to the rest of your team members. Overall, the biggest thing to remember is that for every dollar you have tied up in your inventory, whether, you know, when you're overstocked, like that example, the 20,000 SKUs, if you can't move that inventory, every dollar you have tied up is a lost opportunity to invest back into your organization. And that's why demand planning is very important. You know, you need to build into it. It's not, like Jamie said, it's not something that happens overnight, but you want to do your due diligence of getting it set up correctly so that it can provide you that efficiency down the road. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start looking into, what does this demand process look like? As we look at the demand process, there's a couple of different steps that we're going to be reviewing. We're going to be talking about the concepts, making sure you understand those item preference fields, the information that's there, understand how demand is calculated, talk about the generate demand plans functionality within NetSuite and how it goes into the calculate supply. The generation of your supply plans, how that information comes through, and then gets you to ultimately the end stage, which is issuing orders, work orders, purchase orders, whatever have you, and then your ability to receive those orders into your facility. Okay, the accuracy of demand planning. Let's just make sure that we're understanding this. This is driven by 2 things. So the first are the preferences that you're going to establish on your item records. And the second is going to be your transactional history. And that transactional history can come into 2 ways, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So these 2 together are going to allow NetSuite to, 1, calculate that you have the right product in stock. And 2, it's going to ensure that you can either purchase or build it at the right time. So to get started, we want to look at that. And when we talked about that transactional information, you have 2 ways. Either the system can calculate it for you, or if you have it in an Excel spreadsheet or some other plan, NetSuite will allow you manually to load that into the system in via CSV import, whatever have you. So it doesn't necessarily have to live in the system natively. You can import your demand. All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to get started and talk about those inventory preferences and really make sure that we're driving home that information, because it's imperative to make sure you're successful in calculating your numbers. So here you're going to see a screenshot. It's not a full screenshot. There are a lot of different fields that you can have on your inventory preferences. And this is something that as GVO and our consulting, we would come in and look at it with you based off of your enabled features, what you have set up. If you've got multi-locations, if you're a single location, all of that can play into the process and understand what different fields are available to you. Another thing you're going to note is that depending on the replenishment method you're selecting, it can also change the different fields, and it's going to highlight or gray out ones that are not applicable based off the replenishment method that you've selected. Okay. One of the most critical areas for planning the process is defining your parameters, like we've talked about. These settings are found under your inventory management section of each item. So if you go into your account and you look at that, that's where you're going to start to see this information. You also have to be able to set up these preferences, like we said, at just an item level. But if you are doing multi-location, you do have the ability to set up some of these parameters at a location level as well. You can set different safety stock levels depending on, maybe a warehouse is on the East Coast or the West Coast. Maybe your facility does not have that big of a stock room, so you keep a lower amount in hand than what you do at some of your retail locations. Every single one of these, though, is imperative to making sure the calculations are happening in the background. So as we talked about, the first thing is that replenishment method. You've got 2 different ways to calculate your replenishment. The first of which is just a reorder point. Now, if you're using reorder point, that does not require you, excuse me, to have demand planning turned on in your system. Reorder point uses just the advanced inventory management settings. So really it's, more reactive than it is proactive in the planning. And we can talk about that in a couple more slides. Excuse me. The next option that you have for your replenishment method is time-phased. 1 second here. So in order to calculate your orders based on item demand, this is the method that you would be turning on. So if you did time phase, you would have to have demand planning turned on in your application. The time phase is going to give you 4 different methods to look at. And again, as we get down in the next slides, we'll talk about each of those in a little bit more detail. One of the next ones you have, we kind of look down the bottom part of that list. Again, we won't talk about all of these, but just want to kind of focus on some of the main ones. Your demand source. Your demand source is going to help you understand where is that demand coming from. Are you forecasting your demand? Are you planning your demand based off of orders you have in the system and also a forecast number? You can do it off of just future sales, but you could also do it based off of forecast consumption. And what does that mean? Your forecast consumption is kind of a combination of both of those. You'd have a forecast in there, and as orders start to come in, it's going to deplete the sales order number from your forecast. So it kind of gives you a net result versus where order and forecast, it is going to be a culmination of both of those. Again, so really kind of understanding your demand source. The nice thing about this is that every item could be a different setup. So you may have some items that you only want to be based on forecast. You might have some that are based off of forecast and consumption. This is something that can be set up at an item by item level, but just you want to make sure you have a premise of what the best way is to understand those numbers. The next one you want to really make sure you understand is your supply type. So if you're someone who does a lot of your purchasing, you're not a manufacturing environment, your supply type is really going to be for purchase. So that's how you're going to get your items into your warehouse or into your locations, is by issuing a purchase order to your suppliers. If you're a manufacturing facility and it's an assembly item, then that supply type is going to be the assemble. That's where a work order is going to get generated in order to ensure that you've got the items produced to meet that need. Okay. Fixed lot sizing and even supply lot sizing, as we look into those, that's just going to help you understand when you're procuring your items, it's going to set that number. So a fixed lot size is going to tell you, yep, I just want to purchase based off of the number that's being calculated. If you have, that's your lot for lot. Fixed lot size is going to say, let's say if I want 150 units, my calculation comes through, demand tells me I need 200. Well, it's going to tell me to order 300 because I'm either ordering in 150 lot increments. Okay. And then your period of supply, that is another option within your drop down. And that's just helping you. It's going to do an aggregation of your purchase orders and your work orders based on your overall demand requirements. So it's designating a period of supply and making sure that you've got that right set, whether you're looking at it weekly or monthly to meet your needs. So as we go through, you got your preferred stock level, and again, safety stock, so you can kind of see how those are grayed out depending on where you're at. Essentially, that's just going to tell you how much inventory do you want to make sure you always have on hand. As a safety stock, as pretty much most of you are going to know, that indicates if I have got maybe a 60-day lead time with my suppliers, I want to make sure that I've got enough inventory to meet my daily sales demand. That's going to kind of account for where I've got that lag within the transportation cycle. It's your backup. It's always making sure that you probably don't want to be running out. You maybe probably set your safety stock on some of your high running items, where you've got most of your sales coming into. The big thing for that is it's ensuring you've got the demand and you've got the items to meet that customer's needs. You don't want your customers walking away from your buys. All right, moving on. As we talked about before, we're going to get into the discussion on what are those different replenishment options. So we talked about reorder points specifically, and when we talked about the reorder point, we said that is just an advanced inventory module. It doesn't require any demand planning features. It's reactive because truly, in fact, all it's telling you is once you hit a minimum number on your item, it's going to flag you to reorder it. It's not taking into account what your demand is supposed to be. It's not looking at any future orders to ensure that you're covering those needs. It's just going to tell you if your reorder point is once I hit 100 units or 20 units, you get to that number, it's going to tell you you need to order more. It's going to be up to you to determine how much you want to order. Okay, so it's not going to do a calculation for you. When we get into the demand planning features, these are the different approaches that we have. So there's 4 different methodologies that we can look at. So of them are the linear regression, the moving average, a seasonal, or sales forecast. Let's look at each one of those. So your linear regression, that's going to use your previous demand to project your future inventory. This is going to be based off of an ordinary, the least squared regression model. So it's going to go through, it's going to look at that historical duration of sales, and it's going to group your demand along a demand line. So you can see from these charts, based on, kind of see the ebb and flow of where your demand history was at, it's going to kind of show you that progressional line of how your inventory should be ramping up to meet those needs. Next, you've got your moving averages. So the moving average, again, similar to the linear regression, it's going to look at the average of your historical demand to calculate that average stock level. So as it goes through, it's going to kind of smooth it out, and it's just going to make sure that you're always bringing in, let's say your average is 100 units a month. It's going to have you do 100 units versus 50, then 75, 25. It's going to even it out. So next we've got time phase. So time phase, if you kind of think about it, and especially here in the Midwest, we're getting ramped up, unfortunately, for that wonderful winter months when things start to get cold, and you only have items that you need of ice scrapers, snow blowers, shovels. You don't necessarily carry those all year long. So what the system is going to do, it goes back and it looks at that seasonal trend of your inventory and flows, and to ensure that you're stocking up in advance for those sales. So again, as it's going to start to look at it, you're going to peak up, usually right around, the October timeframe, start getting some of that inventory in stock. But then you see it's going to start to decrease your demand once you kind of get to that, again, March. Let's hope that we have no snow coming by then. It depletes when you're going to have some of that inventory coming in, because you don't want to carry a lot of that overstock during your spring and summer months. You aren't going to need those. People aren't buying them off the shelves. So the system's going to go back again and look again from that historical standpoint. what that flow looks like on a seasonal method. One thing to call out when you are using a seasonal method, you can only look at that at a monthly level. That does not allow you to do demand at a week level, which is a little bit different. So just make sure that you're looking at just monthly needs on a seasonal forecast. And then the last option that is out there for you to use is based off of sales forecasts. So when you're using NetSuite for your sales operations, you have the ability to be forward looking. And what that's going to look at is going to look at your sales orders, any of your opportunities, any of the estimates that you have in the system to project what your demand is going to be. So it's forward looking at what's projected to be out there or based on actual sales. Maybe if you are an organization that does a lot of pre-sales or goes out and does a lot of quoting, you've got those orders kind of pre-built out there, and you're almost more of a build the order in that case, but you're already kind of getting it in advance. You know what to project. That's where you'd want to go ahead and you can use your time-phased sales forecast to give you those numbers. So once we've determined what our inventory preferences are going to be, everything is set up properly, the first output that we're going to see from NetSuite is going to be the demand plan. So again, like we talked about, either by evaluating our past sales or looking at your predicted sales, NetSuite's going to give you an estimate for how much you're expecting to sell over a determined period of time. And that period of time can be set by you. In NetSuite, on the upper right-hand side of the screen, you'll see where it's got projected start dates, and it also gives you a projection. How far do you want it to be projecting out? Recommendation is that you always kind of start out small with this. Tighten up that time period. Don't go looking for a 6 month right away or even a year until you've been able to build some confidence in your process. You're understanding how your data is feeding into these plans. You want to make sure that you've got the best understanding of the information. It's your data. You understand your business. If you're confident in the information that's coming out, then you can start to broaden that a little bit more. But up front, you want to make sure that you are just taking the time to look at that information and really kind of scrub it and understand what's happening. You do have the ability when you're on the screen to go through, you could do all items if you want. As a previous planner, depending on how many SKUs you're managing, that can be very overwhelming. So our recommendation is, you can customize it. Maybe your items are set up based off of a specific planner. You can put that in a filter screen. You could filter it based off of different classifications of your items. You could base it on different departments. There's different ways based off your item record that you can slice and dice your information to look at it in a little bit more holistic realm. You want to make sure that these calculations, like we said before, are accurate. This is really what's going to be driving your calculations for your inventory to come in. If the numbers don't seem right, do your due diligence to do a little bit of scrubbing and understand, did we key in something incorrectly? Did a sales order get put in by mistake that, again, it was that 20,000 sales order. It should have only been a 2,000 sales order. Look at some of those things and just make sure that someone's not doing any fat keying, that there wasn't an inaccurate historical data load put into the system. Just make sure you understand your data. So once we've gone through now, we've said, all right, we're good on my items. I want to go ahead and I want to calculate my demand. So the second output that's going to come from NetSuite is going to be your supply plan. This is basically an outline of whether you need to buy the item or if you need to build it. So remember, demand is just telling you what you're expected to sell. Your supply is already looking at, well, what do I already have on hand? Or what do I already have on order that might be able to supplement that demand? So where the difference in those numbers are at is what your supply plan is going to be telling you. Where do I need to increase my inventory to meet that? So again, when you go through, you can look at this, you can have those cross-functional conversations. This where it's very important to make sure that you are meeting with, your marketing team, your sourcing team, anybody that has any input into an item, get together and have a quick conversation. You might find out that, again, marketing was doing a web blast. Maybe they've decided to do some promotion item and you weren't aware of it. Anything that can greatly impact that demand, you are going to want to know about it if you are an inventory planner. Okay, your purchasing team or supply team, they may be able to tell you that there's an issue with the raw material, or there might be a strike coming from the shippers. All those things come into place because that may mean you want to look at your orders in the future, start pushing some of those ahead. Anything, like I said, that you can get ahead of that's going to impact your inventory, you want to be having those conversations. You want to have cross-functional collaboration. You're all in this together. You're all working together as a team. You want to make sure your high-level plans are meeting those accomplishments. So once you've established your supply plan, you go ahead and you're going to say, yep, I want to generate my supply plan. One of the outputs that you're going to be able to see within the NetSuite account is the concept of a gross requirement. The gross requirement is going to give you the ability to analyze, what are those transactions that are driving specific needs on an item. So this isn't a roll up. This is specifically at a location level, or you can do all locations, but it's specifically at an item. So the screen here is going to show, we've got a widget that had a beginning inventory level, but then it starts to come through and it's going to tell you transactionally what's driving that demand or what's driving that supply. So you can go in there, you can hit your show details. It will actually give you the link to the actual purchase order or the actually assembly work order that's driving it. Again, another means of kind of really validating what's driving my numbers, what's driving my quantity on hand from a transactional level. Once you've gone through and done all this, now you've got the ability, I can order my items. So again, we've determined our demand, we've determined our supply, so we know what we need to do, but now we need to make sure that we can actually get those orders to our suppliers or get the work orders out to our manufacturing floor. That's the last piece of making sure that we've got that inventory ordered correctly. So now that we've sent our orders off to our suppliers or off to our manufacturing floor, we're ready to receive those units back into stock. All right. One of the things with NetSuite that you really want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence on is making sure you're keeping your information accurate. All right. So as we kind of talked about before, garbage in is going to give you garbage out. You are still having to take control of the information within your system. If you're getting any updates from your supplier, so maybe they had a production issue, you're only going to get 50% of what you ordered. You want to make sure that your purchase order reflects that information correctly. You don't want to plan that you're going to get 100 units and only 50 of them show up at a 10/5 date or whatever that case may be. Because what you could be is you may have been planning on orders going out the door, and now if you've only got half of that inventory on hand, you're going to be communicating to customers on a back ordered situation. You may be in the case where you can't get that item, and now you've got to go back to your customers and explain that, you've lost that sale, that the items aren't coming back in. So you want to be sure that as soon as you get the information, get it put into the system right away. Again, all your cross-functional team members are going to be able to see that data. You should be having, whether it's weekly updates on any issues that are happening within your pipeline. You always want to make sure that you're communicating up front. Other thing that you want to make sure you're communicating is maybe a date is going to slide. You want to make sure you're putting that in. Maybe it's a date where it's going to be pushed up. There may have been an issue where, we need to get inventory out the door faster from a warehouse, and they've asked, hey, can you take it in sooner? Go ahead and make sure you're putting that in, because if it's someone who's looking at inventory levels and what that carrying cost is going to be, receiving that inventory earlier is going to affect your accounting team. They're going to want to know that that inventory level is also going up. So again, demand planning, supply planning, all the way through your process, it definitely impacts every piece of the organization when it comes to inventory. One thing I can't call out enough is that you want to make sure that you are taking advantage of your dashboards and your reminders that are in NetSuite. That portal is going to help you to understand what orders are out there to be received, what work orders are supposed to be completed. It's going to help you identify if you have any past due shipments. All of those play into a customer experience and making sure that you've got the right inventory at the right time and the right quantity. The better that you can, communicate to yourself and your team members where things stand, do it easier. Don't make it hard on yourself. Set up those reminders so it's right there in front of you and you can see it again on a daily or a weekly basis. You set that cadence. All right, some of the real life applications. So as we can see from this webinar, there were a number of different industry types and business types that have signed up for this. One thing that you want to call out is that inventory planning can really be used for any type of business that is doing inventory or assembly items. You know, anything that you are planning to bring into your warehouse or into your, brick and mortar location, wherever it might be, that's what you want to be able to plan. You know, you really can't plan for services within the system. It's not going to tell you to purchase any services. This is the things that you're stocking somewhere physically in a location. That's where your demand planning is going to come through. You know, again, anything from gift and home, we got medical supply, we've got, building supply companies on here, business to consumer, retailers, wholesalers, even smaller industries, even my own, personal business. I still plan for that. I want to make sure I've got my correct inventory to meet my customers' needs as well. So no matter how you're doing it, you just want to make sure you have a great understanding of the items that you are supplying to your customers, looking at how you can get that product in your house, in your door, on your shelves to meet the needs and demands of your customer. As with anything else that we know in NetSuite, there's always things that you can add into it. Native NetSuite generally might not meet your needs, but you want to go ahead and see, what other options could be available to supplement. A couple of different applications that we've seen either work natively or outside of the system, but we want to make sure that, you're getting something that's robust enough to meet your needs, but make sure that you truly understand what your needs are, what your requirements are. You don't want to overcomplicate the process right away. So some of our recommendations is always a crawl, walk, run. If you understand maybe native NetSuite first, see how it's working. Are there any ebbs and flows? Is there something more robust that you need that the out-of-box planning module isn't providing? Then, then maybe you look at some of the third-party applications that are out there that can supplement that need. A couple of those applications, like we said, are built for NetSuite, and another one is a standalone that through development process, we can work to get the information back into the system with you. So a couple of those are DemandWorks, Blue Ridge are two of the ones recommended out of NetSuite under your suite apps. Those are the ones that are the built-in bundles, again, for provisioning from a NetSuite perspective. You can download those. The other one, Sapio Solutions. That's more of a robust solution that actually gathers the information from you, whether it be multiple data sources or a one data source, but it's going to go in and optimizes both your forecasting and your buying needs. That is one that, like I said, it's a standalone, and through a development standpoint, we can help you integrate to get your buys back into the NetSuite application. Now that we've given you some insight into demand planning, I know that you're all itching to get out there and get started. The phones are going to be ringing off the hook today, we can tell, but GVO can help you. So one of the ways that we talked about, and Jamie mentioned it before too, when we talked about the warehouse module last month, is if you're a current client of ours, just reach out to your senior business consultant. We're always going to be happy to explore this opportunity or even other opportunities with you to continue to build your business. Like I said, you all know who your senior business consultant is, so you can just reach out to us. If you're new to goVirtualOffice and you really like what you've seen here, email us at netsuitesimplified@govirtualoffice.com. Express your interest in what you've seen and you've learned about today, and see how GVO can be of assistance to you. We'll go ahead and you'll get assigned a senior business consultant to review your business. We'll do an assessment, understand what your needs are, and see then, what are those next steps that we can really become a partner with you and drive your business needs. A couple of things that we want to call out is, kind of what can you expect in this process? So as we talked about, sales history is something that is imperative to build out your demand plans. And you've got those two options. So one is you want to have at least 1 year's worth of sales history available. Again, whether that be directly in NetSuite or doing a CSV import. Either way, our data team can help you get that information and take advantage of that historical information. Again, you want to make sure that you can get it into the system in a means that's going to help you drive those demand calculations. And the next one is that, from a consulting standpoint, the consultants will come in and we're going to help you analyze your business. We're going to make sure that we're aligned to the understanding of how many SKUs you're talking about, you know, what is your historical volume? What are the different business segments of your items? Like we talked about when we did those inventory preferences, it's not a one shoe fits all model. Each different item or different item type could have a different demand plan set up to it. So you might have some that were linear, you might have some that were seasonal. You may even have some items that are truly just set up as a reorder point. You don't need to demand for those. You just always want to make sure that when you get to a minimum level, you're just constantly reordering those. But those are the things that from a goVirtualOffice standpoint, we're going to help you understand and make sure that you are aligning to your business needs and you have an understanding of the system. Ultimately, we want you to be successful. If you understand how things are happening in the NetSuite account, that's going to drive your business. It's not going to be, you know, Jamie or myself sitting there running this for you, but we're going to ensure that you know what you need to know to make your business work. So as we tie a pretty bow around the last part of the process, you know, we just want to be able to communicate what have we covered so far today with you. You know, so we've talked about, you know, supply and demand plans. We talked about, you know, how you can go ahead and execute those supply and demand plans in the system. And ultimately want to ensure that you always have the right inventory at the right time, the right place, and the right quantity. So in closing, the most important aspect of demand planning is that you just need to make sure that your information is accurate and it's correct. I mean, we can't stress it enough. You've got garbage in, you will have garbage out. So you want to do your due diligence of scrubbing that information, you know, doing a great job on getting your setups where they need to be. Like I said, we want you to be successful. We want you to take that time. It's not just a flip of a switch that you're going to be able to start doing this tomorrow. There is some, you know, some runway room that you need to do to analyze your business and get it set up. All right, so hope that you've, you know, taken some information back from this. And at this point, we can talk about what is next in our webinar series.
Thank you, Renee. Great content. So as Renee has pulled up there for everyone to see, we do have 2 webinars coming up in the beginning of November. The first one is basically around integrations, and that one will be on November the 4th. And then also we have one right after that in conjunction with one of our partners, Tadpole. We're going to be discussing e-commerce, ERP, analytics, and how that all comes together to help you be successful. So if you are interested in signing up for those webinar series, please look on our website or reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you out. Renee, you covered a lot of great content. I do have a series of questions here that if you don't mind, I'm going to go through. The first one I'll answer for you. It's I could have done this as housekeeping at the beginning, but the question came up a couple times. Is this presentation going to be recorded and shared? And the answer is yes. So anybody that signed up for this, we're going to go through, probably just do a little bit of editing just to make sure that it, you know, looks nice. But you can expect that as an email in probably about a day or 2. So everyone that's attending, you will receive a copy of that. The next one that I received was, you know, is demand planning an add-on module? And if so, what's the cost?
Yes, so demand planning is an add-on module. List price for demand planning is $5.99 a month. So what we recommend is, again, when you reach out to us or, you know, even to your service provider, you know, you're going to find out, you know, what are your discounts that you already have on top of it. But, you know, just want to call out that it is an add-on, so take that into account when you're doing it, and that your list price of $5.99 a month.
Okay, thank you. Next one is very much related to that. So what's the normal implementation cost for this if GVO were to help somebody, or how many hours would they expect us to spend helping them?
Yep, and so from an hour estimate, we can give you that information. We said from that data standpoint, generally you're going to look at an average about 40 hours of doing your data imports. You know, it's gathering the information. Let's make sure we've got the right data points in there. Do we have the right volume of information? Getting it scrubbed to put into your system. So our data team usually on average about 40 hours there. From a consulting standpoint, about the same, anywhere from 30 to 40 hours of consulting on average. We're going to go through those item inventory preferences. We're going to want to make sure that you've looked at each individual item or group of items and really understand what those settings are supposed to be. Educate you again on what that means in your calculations, but ultimately some of that's really going to be the onus on the business itself setting those up. If you want GVO to, do some of the setup for you, then that incurs some of the additional costs from a configuration standpoint.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next question was, how can my company start using this if we're not even using reorder point planning at this point?
Right. So crawl, walk, run. So the biggest thing is, kind of maybe break it out. One of the biggest things that you're going to find out is, you might be overwhelmed by your SKUs. 80% of your sales generally come from the top 20% of your items. So just breaking it down in that aspect to find out where are my biggest drivers of my sales, start looking at those items first and determine, what is best. Is it setting up a reorder point to make sure you've got the correct safety stock intact to ensure you can meet those needs as you're building up and ramping up for demand planning? It's just a good way to analyze what that business needs, but don't feel overwhelmed that every single SKU needs to have a plan attached to it. Break it down that way.
Excellent. Next one was, how do I handle sales growth that's either going to be above or below historical, in the time-phased demand models?
So one thing that you do have the ability within the NetSuite demand plan is you do have a percent factor you can put in there. So you could say, hey, you know what? I've got an inkling that I might be up 10%, 15%. You can apply that factor into your demand plan. Again, it might be something where if you're doing your manual plans, taking that into account where you're ebbing and flowing. You do have the ability when those plans are generated in the system as well, you can manually override any of the calculations that are coming in from the NetSuite system. So we talked about before where if it's calculating that you need 200 units, but that there is going to be a large sales presence, whether it be a back cover or a web blast, you can go ahead and say, hey, I need to increase that output to make sure I'm meeting that. So you do have the ability to work with the information in your system. That's why it's always imperative to make sure that you are taking a set of eyes at that data. Make sure cross-functionally your team members are working together, that everyone feels comfortable with the calculations that are coming out.
Okay. And last one that I received was, can the item supply plan be exported?
That is a good question. I've never exported it. Jamie, have you done that in any of yours?
I have not. It cannot be naturally exported. However, you can do a search off of it. So, as anything in NetSuite, if you are able to get it into like a search or a report, anybody that's in NetSuite, that you can always hit that export button. So short answer is it doesn't come out naturally out of the box like that, but long answer is it can be done. Correct.
Yep.
Okay. So that is all that I have for questions. So I just want to thank everyone for your participation with the questions, also for taking the time to attend. Tell your friends, tell your family. We'll be here every month. So I just want to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day, and you are all getting back approximately 12 minutes. So have a great one. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.